For more than 150 years, the story of the Alaska Purchase has been told as a punchline, a joke at Russia's expense. In 1867, the Russian Empire sold off a colossal piece of its territory for pennies on the acre. What they dismissed as a frozen wasteland was handed over to the United States. Today, we know that wasteland as Alaska, a land overflowing with gold, swimming with oil, and positioned in one of the most strategically critical locations on the planet. The sale is often seen as Russia's single greatest blunder, a moment of historic short-sightedness that gifted an empire to its future rival. But what if that story is wrong? What if for the desperate, crumbling Russian Empire of the 1860s, selling Alaska wasn't just a good idea, it was their only move? What if it was a calculated, even brilliant act of geopolitical triage? And the real mistake, the colossal error at the heart of this story, was something that no one saw coming. To understand why Russia let go of a future empire, you first have to understand the disaster that was forcing its hand.
The empire on its knees. To get why the sale happened, you have to erase the modern map from your mind. Forget the oil rigs and the gold mines. We have to travel back to the mid-19th century, to a Russia that wasn't a confident superpower, but a wounded giant. The main wound, the one that poisoned everything else, was the Crimean War. Fought between 1853 and 1856, the war was a catastrophic humiliation. A coalition of the Ottoman Empire, France, and Britain defeated Russia on its own doorstep, and the conflict exposed the rot at the core of the Tsarist state. Its military was antiquated, its infrastructure was crumbling, and its finances were in shambles. The war was financed by massive borrowing, leaving the empire under severe financial strain and teetering on the edge of a major crisis. The government was living far beyond its means, and the debt was crushing.
In this climate of desperation, every corner of the empire was scrutinized for its value, and Russian America, as Alaska was then known, was found severely wanting. From St. Petersburg, Alaska wasn't a land of opportunity. It was a gigantic, frozen money pit. The territory was staggeringly remote. Just getting supplies and people there was a logistical nightmare, requiring a journey across all of Siberia and the treacherous Bering Sea, or a perilous months-long voyage around the globe. The cost of governing this distant colony was a constant drain on a treasury that was already empty. The very reason Russia was there in the first place, the fur trade, was collapsing. For decades, the Russian-American company had cashed in on the region's rich populations of sea otters and seals. But by the 1850s, overhunting and competition had decimated the animals. The fur trade, once a source of immense wealth, was a shadow of its former self, and the company was now surviving on government handouts. Russia, as one American newspaper later put it, had a sucked orange on its hands, a territory whose primary value had already been extracted.
But all of those problems were dwarfed by a single, terrifying geopolitical reality: the British Empire. To the east of Alaska lay British North America, soon to become Canada. Relations between Russia and Britain were toxic. They were arch-rivals, and the Crimean War was the bloody proof. Russian officials lived in constant fear of the next conflict. And Alaska was a glaring, indefensible vulnerability. From their naval bases, the British could seize Alaska with relative ease. Russia's military presence there was tiny, just a few hundred men who could offer no real resistance. Russian strategists looked at the map and saw an inevitability. In the next war with Britain, which they felt was a matter of when, not if, they would lose Alaska. The Royal Navy would blockade it, troops would march in, and the territory would be annexed without Russia getting a single ruble. This wasn't just paranoia, it was a cold, hard strategic calculation. The territory was a liability, a hostage to British aggression. The question wasn't how to hold on to it, but how to get rid of it in a way that benefited Russia.
The deal of a lifetime, or a fire sale. Faced with an unprofitable colony that was likely to be seized by their greatest enemy, the Russian government explored an audacious solution: selling it. The idea had been floated before, but after Crimea, it became urgent. The Tsar's own brother, Grand Duke Constantine, argued that Russia should liquidate the American territory before it was lost for nothing.
But who would buy it? Selling to the British was out of the question. That would be like handing a weapon to your enemy. The choice fell to the United States. At the time, Russia and America had surprisingly warm relations, seeing each other as a useful counterweight to British global power. For Russia, selling Alaska to the Americans achieved two goals at once. First, it would turn a costly liability into desperately needed cash. Second, it would block British expansion by placing a massive territory in the hands of a friendly power. It was a shrewd strategic play.
The deal was brokered by the Russian minister to the U.S., Baron Edward de Stokel, and the fiercely expansionist U.S. Secretary of State, William H. Seward. Seward was a firm believer in manifest destiny and had long coveted Alaska, seeing it as a stepping stone for American trade with Asia. In March 1867, Stokel got the green light from Tsar Alexander II to make a deal. He approached Seward, and things moved with astonishing speed. The story goes that on the evening of March 29th, Stokel went to Seward's home to say the Tsar had approved. Instead of waiting, an enthusiastic Seward insisted they finalize the treaty right then and there. Working by candlelight, they hammered out the details, and at 4 o'clock in the morning on March 30, 1867, the treaty was signed. The United States would purchase Russian America for $7.2 million. Today, $7.2 million for a territory more than twice the size of Texas seems laughably cheap, about 2 cents an acre. But this view is warped by hindsight. In 1867, $7.2 million was a substantial sum. To put it in perspective, the purchase price was about 2% of the entire U.S. federal budget that year. This wasn't seen as a pittance. In fact, the American reaction was far from positive. The purchase was widely mocked. Critics called it Seward's folly and Seward's icebox. Newspapers were filled with scorn, with one proclaiming, "Russia has sold us a sucked orange." Getting the treaty and the money through Congress was a battle. Senator Charles Sumner, initially doubtful, became a key advocate. After studying the territory, he delivered a marathon 3-hour speech in favor of the purchase. It was Sumner who championed the name Alaska, which was derived from an Aleut word meaning the Great Land. His passionate advocacy helped ratify the treaty in the Senate.
Securing the funds from the House of Representatives proved even harder, delayed by political infighting for over a year. It was later rumored that Stokel had to use some of the funds to bribe lobbyists and journalists to get the appropriation passed. Finally, in July 1868, the House approved the funding. On October 18, 1867, in a ceremony at Sitka, the Russian flag was lowered and the American flag was raised. The territory, administered initially by the U.S. Army, came under American control. For the Russians, it was a successful liquidation. For the Americans, it was a gamble on a frozen wasteland. And for the first 30 years, it looked like the critics were right.
The twist and the true price. For 3 decades, Alaska lay quiet. It was a remote, sparsely populated territory, largely ignored by the rest of the country. Seward's folly seemed to be just that, a foolish waste of money. The Russian government, watching from afar, could feel secure in its decision. They had unloaded a burdensome colony and avoided its likely seizure by the British. Problem solved. Then, in 1896, everything changed. Gold was discovered on Bonanza Creek, a tributary of the Klondike River in the neighboring Canadian Yukon. The news sparked one of the most frantic gold rushes in history. Over the next few years, around 100,000 prospectors descended on the region, and the main gateway to the Canadian goldfields was through Alaska. Towns like Skagway exploded overnight. While the richest fields were in Canada, the Klondike Gold Rush put Alaska on the map and triggered further prospecting within its borders. Soon, major gold strikes were made in Nome in 1898 and Fairbanks in 1902.
Suddenly, Alaska wasn't an icebox. It was a treasure chest. That $7.2 million price tag now looked like the greatest bargain in history. The gold rushes alone would produce wealth that dwarfed the purchase price many times over. But gold was just the beginning. The 20th century unlocked Alaska's staggering riches.
Vast forests provided timber. Its rivers teemed with salmon. And then, in 1968, came the discovery that would redefine Alaska's value forever: the Prudhoe Bay oil field. This colossal reservoir of black gold transformed Alaska into an energy superpower. Billions of dollars in oil revenue flowed from the very land Russia had sold for pennies. Beyond oil, there was natural gas, copper, zinc, silver, and countless other critical minerals. The economic loss for Russia is almost impossible to calculate, but the true price went far beyond money. It bled into geopolitics. As the world plunged into global conflicts, Alaska's location, once a liability, transformed into an unparalleled strategic asset. General Billy Mitchell, a father of the U.S. Air Force, declared in 1935, "Alaska is the most strategic place in the world." A look at a globe shows why. Alaska sits at the crossroads of the Northern Hemisphere, a linchpin connecting North America, Asia, and the Arctic. During World War II, this became terrifyingly clear when Japan invaded and occupied several of the Aleutian Islands, a brutal campaign that hammered home Alaska's defensive importance. During the Cold War, that strategic value skyrocketed. Alaska became America's northern shield, the front line against the Soviet Union. It offered the shortest flight paths for bombers and missiles between the two superpowers. The U.S. military invested massively in air bases, radar stations, and missile defense sites across the state. In the ultimate irony, the very land Russia sold to keep it out of British hands had become the forward operating base for its new, more powerful global adversary. They had sold their own watchtower to the enemy. Today, as the Arctic melts, Alaska's importance only continues to grow. The final verdict. So, was selling Alaska Russia's biggest mistake? The answer is complicated. It's a story of two different realities: the grim reality of 1867 and the glaring reality of today. Let's make the case that it was a brilliant move. In the 1860s, the decision was arguably the only smart choice. Russia was financially crippled. Alaska was an expensive, unprofitable colony that was completely indefensible against a very real British threat. Selling it allowed Russia to turn a guaranteed loss into immediate cash and solve a major strategic problem. From the perspective of Tsar Alexander II, they had dodged a bullet. They couldn't develop it, they couldn't defend it, so they sold it. It was a rational decision based on the facts at hand. Now, the case for colossal error. This case requires only one tool: hindsight. The moment gold was discovered, the deal began to look lopsided. When oil started flowing, it looked like a historic swindle. And when American fighter jets and missile interceptors were based on Alaskan soil, pointed right at Russia, it looked like a strategic blunder of epic proportions. The wealth from Alaska's resources could have dramatically altered Russia's economic development. Its strategic position could have fundamentally changed the Cold War. From where we stand today, it looks like an act of unparalleled folly. So which is it? The truth is that the sale of Alaska was both. It was a brilliant solution to a 19th century problem that created a catastrophic 20th century regret. But maybe this brings us to the real mistake. Perhaps the mistake wasn't the sale itself, but a symptom of a deeper disease. The real failure was the Russian Empire's inability to develop, populate, and integrate its own territory. Alaska was unprofitable because the Russian-American company had mismanaged it. It was indefensible because the state had failed to invest in it. The biggest mistake was being in a position where selling was the only logical option. It was a failure of vision and governance that forced the sale. The story of the Alaska Purchase is more than a historical transaction. It's a powerful lesson in perspective. It shows how a decision can be both perfectly rational and disastrously wrong, all depending on when you're looking from. For the Russia of 1867, it was an escape from a dead end. For the Russia of today, it's a ghost of a lost empire, a constant reminder of the wealth and power that was traded away for a future they never knew they had. But what do you think? Was Russia forced into a smart move, or did they give away an empire for a pittance? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.